The challenge of evaluating and negotiating mining projects is a symptom of a market in transition in Kazakhstan. Small mining companies that cling to unrealistic, unmodeled price expectations risk being left behind as the sector consolidates around sophisticated majors and state-backed giants. Conversely, buyers who fail to appreciate the improving regulatory landscape, the tax benefits, and the genuine geological potential of the region will miss out on the global race for critical minerals. The case-based approach to be discussed in the upcoming investment session will demonstrate that the valuation gap can be bridged when both sides stop looking at the ground and start looking at the project's technical, financial, and legal basis of design.
Okay, I think we can start. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for this really exciting and very professional session. We are going to speak about investments, valuation, and deal-making in Kazakhstan. As you know, we're all seeing increasing consolidation and entry of new international and state-backed players and intensifying global competition for critical minerals. All of which are reshaping how assets are valued and transactions are executed, not only in Kazakhstan, but also globally. Aristotle once said that for most, things are differently valued by those who have them and by those who wish to get them. What belongs to us and what we give away always seems very precious to us. Thanks to Nobel Prize winners, Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman, we know it today as endowment effect or ownership bias. But instead of having a broad discussion about the behavioral economics, we will focus on a little bit more specific aspects of valuation in mining industry. From one side, project owners often anchor expectations to the pricing of commodities, and we see the recent trends that really add a lot of creativity from the owner's perspective in terms of valuation. But at the same time, investors apply increasingly rigorous risk-adjusted frameworks to pricing. Together with our distinguished guests, we will try to bridge the gap between the seller's sole focus on resource potential and buyer's valuation based on a robust technical, financial, and legal assessments. We will also explore how risk is assessed and priced, how different players approach valuation, both domestic and international ones, and what practical steps are needed to move from discussions to successful deals in this evolving landscape. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. So let me start with Anna Fardel, who is the principal resource geologist at SLR Consulting. She is ex-SRK Consulting, where she spent 15 years, as I checked on your LinkedIn. Michael Zlobin, CFA, Head of Equity and for Natural Resources at European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD. Always welcome. Vladislav Lozovoy, Head of Business Development at Alt Management. Welcome. And Che Osman, Technical Director, Mining Advisory at SLR Consulting. He's a chartered geologist with over 20 years experience. Thank you for joining us, Che. So we start with presentations, and I invite Vladislav for his first presentation on attracting investment and M&A transactions in the mining sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasi. Доброе утро, уважаемые дамы и господа. Очень приятно видеть, что столько много людей собралось послушать с утра пораньше по поводу M&A сделок в Казахстане, в майнинге, несмотря даже на вчерашний фуршет. Наверное, я займу буквально 1-2 минуты, с вашего позволения, представлю нашу компанию, так как мы только выходим на рынок Казахстана. Меня зовут Владислав Лозовой. Я отвечаю за развитие бизнеса и за инвестиции в компании ЛТ Управление. Наша компания, как непосредственно ЛТ, сформировалась не так давно, всего лишь 1,5 года назад. Но так или иначе, наша команда в том или ином составе работает вместе на протяжении уже почти 15 лет. У нас на борту достаточно сильная команда, которая работала в достаточно таких сложных юрисдикциях, как Россия, Африка. Кто-то тоже и работал и в Южной Америке. На нашем борту наш генеральный директор Денис Александров, в прошлом глава таких золотодобывающих компаний, как Highland Gold, Петропавловск. В текущий момент член совета директоров Норильского никеля. Кроме того, в нашей команде есть и опытные геологи с 40-летним стажем, и металлурги, которые, наверное, забыли про переработку руды гораздо больше, чем все мы с вами на текущий момент знаем. И в целом наша команда... Так, работает ли у нас? Да, наша команда так или иначе занималась управлением больших грунтодобывающих компаний, в том числе и публичных, которые торговались в Москве, в Лондоне. Я надеюсь, и будем управлять компаниями, которые торгуются в Астане. И главная наша мысль, которую мы преподносим нашим клиентам, что тот опыт, который мы получили при управлении большими, я бы сказал, гигантскими горнодобывающими компаниями, мы бы хотели принести для собственников небольших активов. И та команда, которая у нас есть, мы хотели бы принести тот опыт, те методики, те модели, которые мы использовали в больших компаниях для молодых, для небольших активов, и в том числе при оценке этих активов и при проведении MINEX-сделок, о чем я сегодня хотел бы поговорить. В первую очередь хотел бы попросить вас представить ситуацию, да, что есть молодой развивающийся актив, есть у него собственник, который проинвестировал в него свою большую часть состояния за 5-10 лет, за тот срок, которым он им владеет, он полюбил его как родного ребенка, и он оценивает его в $200 миллионов. Но приходит финансист, наверное, такой же, как я выгляжу, там, в костюме, в очках, смотрит на те данные, которые предоставил ему продавец, и оценивает его в $100 миллионов. На самом деле, типичная ситуация, которая происходит на нашем рынке, и коллеги из Ernst & Young в своем глобальном отчете поделились таким инсайдом, что больше половины, даже большая часть сделок срывается в M&A-индустрии, в том числе в горнодобывающей отрасли, именно из-за той ямы, которая происходит в оценке, в различиях к подходу к оценке того или иного актива. На самом деле ситуация достаточно очевидная, да, то, что все те, кто имел отношение к данным сделкам, сталкиваются с ситуацией, что не удалось договориться о цене, но так если немножко глубоко более подумать, в любой другой индустрии, если бы был такой процент, скажем, фейлов, да, неудачи, методики, подходы к проведению MINEX-сделок бы уже давно поменялись. Но, тем не менее, на протяжении уже, наверное, 30 лет, кто-то больше, кто-то меньше, стартует новый проект, выезжает на площадку, на участок, смотрит и дальше его оценивает, и ничего не меняется. Мы у себя в ЛТ, так скажем, для своих клиентов, которые хотят зайти в отрасль, либо хотят продать активы, применяем следующую методологию, которая состоит из 3 базовых частей: из технической, финансовой и юридической. Почему это важно? Почему об этом важно договариваться до начала основных переговоров и до первых оценок? Представьте ситуацию, то, что вы строите дом, и вы договариваетесь о том, какой будет у вас пол ванной, но при этом вы не имеете фундамента еще. Здесь такая же ситуация. Перед тем, как мы в какой-либо MINEX-сделке начинаем обсуждать оценку, мы договариваемся о 3 базовых вещах. Первое – это техническое. На самом деле, по моему мнению, наиболее важная часть, которая заключается в том, как мы оцениваем те или иные ресурсы, какие предпосылки мы вносим в финансовую модель с точки зрения объема руды, ее извлечения, ее содержания, как мы оцениваем ресурсы по системе JORC, либо по советской системе. На самом деле здесь нету правых либо неправых, да, как правило, бывает такая ситуация, что просто по-разному оцениваем ресурсы. И мне кажется, что при применении к Казахстану та система, которая сейчас разрабатывается, Conversely, она как раз-таки, надеюсь, поможет тот valuation gap, который сейчас существует, да, при продаже казахстанских активов международным инвесторам в том числе, этот valuation gap немножко сократить. Вторая часть, так как все-таки мой там финансовый бэкграунд обязывает об этом говорить, это, конечно же, финансовая часть, в том числе те предпосылки, которые мы закладываем в финансовую модель. По моему мнению, основное различие в оценке между продавцом и покупателем происходит, так скажем, по их мнению, не очень важных вещах. Например, при оценке затрат на инфраструктуру, затраты на дорогу к тому или иному месторождению, на инфраструктуру по электроэнергии. Как правило, покупатели очень консервативно подходят к этим оценкам, недозакладывают затраты и не понимают, насколько именно стоит актив. И третья часть, которая тоже важна, и, мне кажется, в применении к Казахстану еще более важно, да, об этом важно говорить, это юридическая чистота актива, его структура собственности, его история, ESG тематика. Мне кажется, для международных инвесторов это наиболее такая чувствительная часть, по которой зачастую казахстанские активы недооцениваются международными инвесторами. И для местных владельцев, местных продавцов, мне кажется, эту часть нужно всегда подтягивать, делать ее более ясной, прозрачной для инвесторов, для того, чтобы получить наиболее справедливую оценку по своему активу. Но при этом, когда мы договариваемся о трех основных ключевых компонентах, существует все равно какой-то разрыв в оценке 10-20%. И мы, как финансисты, как те, кто структурирует сделки, используем уже дополнительные инструменты, которые позволяют сторонам договориться, сделать оценку актива более справедливой. Ну, в первую очередь, это, конечно же, earn-out, механизм, который применяется во многих отраслях, и, по моему мнению, в горнодобывающей отрасли этот механизм должен использоваться чаще. Он позволяет, так скажем, переложить все риски по объему добычи дальнейшему уже на этапе разведки, да, и получить справедливую доходность и для инвесторов, и для продавцов активов. И тем более, что позволяет, так скажем, проверить, кто в итоге ошибался на этапе разведки. Как мы знаем, в нашей отрасли признавать свои ошибки не очень любят, особенно геологи, поэтому это отличный инструмент для того, чтобы все риски перезаложить на будущее. Другие инструменты, о которых мы тоже используем, в том числе и в России, и в Казахстане, это royalty. Royalty очень важный компонент для того, чтобы получить дополнительную доходность для продавца, если он хочет выйти в кэш на этапе разведки, но верит в свой актив, верит в тот тип commodity, которым он занимается. И royalty – это очень хороший инструмент, который с золотодобычей достаточно хорошо работает. Я призываю обращать внимание на этот компонент перед тем, как вы договариваетесь об оценке актива. Ну и другие, наверное, вещи, которые тоже используются в других отраслях и следует использовать в нашей отрасли, это отложенные платежи, это конвертируемые займы, которые очень помогают профинансировать месторождение на этапе разведки, на самых ранних этапах, без существенных рисков для инвесторов, как для инвесторов, так и для продавцов. И, наверное, в завершении хотел бы сказать, что тот опыт, который мы получили в нашей базовой стране, в России, тот опыт, который мы получили в Африке, мы бы хотели бы применить здесь в Казахстане. Поэтому для тех, кто сейчас обсуждает различные сделки, хотел бы войти в отрасль, либо владеет каким-либо активом и хочет получить на него свежий взгляд, очень рада пообщаться. Я буду еще на полях форума сегодня весь день. У нас есть сайт, я думаю, Дениса Александрова многие тоже знают. Поэтому будем рады с вами пообсуждать как горнодобывающую отрасль, так и M&A, сущность в частности. Спасибо большое.
you so much, Vladislav. It was interesting to learn about the toolkits in particular. Let me invite for the next presentation Anna Fardel. Her presentation is about evaluation and comparison of early stage exploration assets. Please.
Thank you, Cassie. So good morning, everyone. I'll be presenting on the technical appraisal of projects which are considered early stage. And I believe this is really topical due to the development of the exploration sector in Kazakhstan and the explosion of new licenses and new license holders. There's been a large amount of money in Kazakhstan entering the mineral exploration space from non-mining sectors, particularly construction. Another trend we observe is companies and financial institutions that traditionally invested in or acquired projects at pre-feasibility or feasibility stage are now looking for earlier stage projects and are changing their risk profile in the race to secure access to critical raw materials across all jurisdictions. So I want to start by defining what an early stage project is. And what we're talking about, what I specifically want to talk about, are projects that sit almost pre-discovery. We're talking about assets here that may have an exploration target, some drilling, a historical resource or reserve estimate, but do not have a current mineral resource as defined by Kazakh, CRISCO or other codes. And these typically sit very much at the front end of the curve. Just for context, we're talking about the time that before Oitoga was developed, so very much 1999 in the context of this example. But I put this up here just to kind of give a bit of perspective as to the scale of how long it takes to develop these type of projects, and also to show that it's not necessarily developed by the first person that discovers it. It may be looked at several times. So why do we evaluate? And I'm talking about technical evaluation here, not necessarily valuation as Vladislav described. Basically, the technical valuation is a really critical part of the due diligence process, but it's also critical for companies internally to regularly inform project development decisions and investment options. It offers a chance to pause and take stock of progress, critically assess, compare various projects and licenses against success variables. But the main objective is to justify further investment to get to a mineral resource. The other thing that we look to do as we progress projects is to examine all the assumptions and information and check that they're right, so that all the identified risks are disclosed and they can inform the development plan. So when we're looking at these really early stage assets, we consider there to be 4 important questions. And even if we don't know that there's a proven deposit there yet, but signs are interesting, these are still very important. So 1, is it there? Geology, is it in our license? Is the geology favorable? Secondly, how are we likely to extract it? Is it near surface? Is it deep? Can it be processed into a saleable product? So is this an unconventional rare earth or a complex stream that we expect? Are there multiple products and multiple markets? And how might we actually get it to that market? I'm going to spend the next 4 slides just expanding on that a little bit. So the key thing that you want to understand when you're first looking at licenses is it there? So you want to verify the geology. Like a lot of our junior explorers showed yesterday, there's a lot of work to get on the ground and check that the assumptions historically were true, the location is correct, and everything adds up. On the left, we have some licenses where the alteration and mineralization is shown, and there's a trend that extends beyond those license areas. But the issue with this particular license is the scale. The combined license area here is less than 1 kilometre squared. So the likelihood of making a commercial scale mining project from that area is incredibly low. However, the mineralization trend is promising. So if that can be mapped and extended and the wider area can be licensed, there's an opportunity there to create a much better, larger project. In the center is a project I worked on where we went to verify the license location and found that the coordinate system and that the client was using was different to the actual country cadastre, and they'd end up sampling outside of their license area. And this is another reason why it's very important at the technical due diligence stage to check, because these assumptions are made that people know where things are, and they just aren't. The other thing to check is obviously, like, if that license is in the name of the company that you're looking at. We've had instances where it might be an employee of the company and not the company itself, or an entity that is in a foreign country or something that is unknown. So there's a risk associated with that you have to understand. And also you want to know how much longer you have to actually prove up this deposit. If it's expiring next week, you haven't got much time. The final picture is copper mineralization taken from verification samples. And the point I want to make here is where the sample is derived from is really important. So in understanding the nature of the data. If we have soil geochemistry samples, we're looking at very low levels of data, and this is not going to tell us if we have a very high-grade asset, potentially. What we're looking for there is a vector, a trend or a pattern that shows us which areas of the license are most prospective that we might want to follow up on. And then obviously hard rock, that's where we're getting more absolute grades and more indications of surface mineralization. But as companies look to explore deeper deposits, we're going to become more reliant on these proxy data, such as remote sensing, geophysics, and we have to be able to understand what that's telling us and the relative value of that. The next question to ask is, how are we going to extract it? So are we going to extract it by in situ recovery? Are we going to extract it by open pit or underground? And what does the geometry of the mineralization we're looking at tell us about how we might mine it? We might think if the deposit is at surface, it's perfect for an open pit. But if we have very narrow vein structures, we can end up diluting and totally destroying our grade by looking at bulk mining methods in those situations. So even though we're, again, looking at very early stage assets, we have to be thinking about how it potentially is going to be developed. The other thing we want to know is, can it be conventionally developed? Is there an easy route, or are we going to have to do something new and exciting, which might take much longer and much more money? And the other thing we want to look at is the scale. If we're looking at a large low-grade deposit, the only way we're going to make that economic is if we can have a high mining rate. So does this lend itself to 5 million tonne per annum plus extraction rate in terms of our deposit scale and size? Do these deposits typically come at a size that supports that? The next one is, can we process it? Our exploration samples tell us the maximum content of metal when ground to tiny microns, but they do not tell us the mineral associations nor the size of those minerals. And these are the key questions to understand in terms of the process. And this is the biggest capital outlay that will ever be on the project if you're developing it on site. The low-grade deposits we see increasingly may be constrained by other factors, such as the hardness of the material, and those requirements for power and comminution may kill the project before it even gets past or gets to resource stage. We also find that old tailings facilities hosted with deleterious elements and compounds may take a huge amount of development and various different processes to actually extract that value. The things we need to also understand is, if processing routes require large amounts of water and power, these are major risks, particularly in rural or remote arid regions. And who's going to pay for installing those services? You know, are they to be provided by you, someone else, or the government? The fourth question is, what is the market and how do I get it there? A lot of times we need to think about what we're selling. Are we selling multiple concentrates? Are we selling ore to a process plant? Are we selling concentrate to a smelter? Do we have multiple streams? This determines the selling price and also the product makeup also impacts this. If we've got deleterious grades or other factors, that can have a very impactful that can be very impactful on the price that we can sell and whatever market we can take. Certain markets, such as the EU, don't take phosphate deposits with a cadmium percentage above, I think it's about 3%, but Morocco has 7%, is the biggest producer in the world. So there are things that constrain what we can and can't do. The other thing we have to understand is how are we going to get it there and who controls that infrastructure? Other considerations, apart from those key four questions, are who is the project team? Are they capable of actually developing this deposit? Who are their advisors? What is the management? What is their background? Do they have any money to actually do the project, the program and the work that they want? Do they have a plan? And how realistic is it? Another factor that's obviously usually in Kazakhstan's favor is the cost and ease of development. You know, how easy is it to explore? How far and how fast can that money go? And another key factor is the security of the license and ESG obligations. So now we've run through the aspects of evaluation of these projects. It's clear that although geology is a key revenue driver, the project potential and likelihood of success depends on considering so many other factors, and the business plan for the asset has to stack up. Some of these can make or break the project before there's even been a discovery. In the next couple of slides, I just wanted to share with you examples of a project development plan and how these might be presented. And this is a fairly simple one for an alluvial deposit, and maybe instead of diamond drilling we could do sonic or alluvial. But the point is that this plan demonstrates that there's progress and that various streams rely on each other. There's no timelines attached to this, and typically you might estimate your next one-year exploration plan with high confidence, but generally you're only going to proceed to the next stage if you have positive results. So this shows a kind of stage-gated plan for more of a hard rock metal deposit. And basically, after each activity, the spend is assessed on its merits and the results. And then at that point, you decide whether you go to the next phase. And we all know it's incredibly difficult to know what's going to happen with these deposits. But evidence of an exit strategy lets you live to fight another day and divert funds to a more prospective project, preventing the sunk cost fallacy and ruining your company. So now I'm going to move on the kind of tools that we use to communicate risk and assess risk on these very early stage projects. I would say this tool is the most important when we're talking about any mining asset in communicating risk. And this is accompanied typically by a risk register. Even at the early stage, we look through all the aspects of the project and we rank them due to the expected likelihood of it occurring, so the risk coming to fruition, and then the impact on the success of the project itself. This should be done comprehensively for all project aspects: geology, mining, processing, ESG, waste, infrastructure, water, power. Generally, at this stage, as you'll see in the next slide, you find that early stage assets, you get higher risks because you're at a stage of great uncertainty. But this example shows that how we've plotted those risks, and you see at the bottom we have 6 different types of risk, and on the right is a brief summary of what we put on the risk register. And as you can see, there are some aspects of the second project where we think there'd be a big permitting risk, for example, National Park Sanctuary Protection Zone, and also the fact that their tonnages may be too small to support standalone operations. And again, it's not something that is necessarily a deal breaker, but it's something that an acquirer will look at, because what they're looking at is potentially developing this asset. This next tool that we use looks to basically compare where the project is and the probability of success, and how the cost of that might change depending on the assets in our portfolio. As you can see, depending on the geological complexity, the size, and other aspects, there's a big difference between different projects. And by doing this, I've got 5 more minutes. I have a 15-minute presentation. Because of this, it's a really good way, if we've got several assets, we can look at how they might be ranked, or we can compare them, and it might show us where we might need a JV or a venture or a different partner to help us develop a certain asset, and another one we might find that we can do it by ourselves because it's more achievable for the management team that we have. So this assessment is one that we did, again, on very early stage projects. And what we did here was looked at an asset ranking where we looked at company strategy. So one strategy was looking at these assets in terms of battery minerals, and the other was really focused on kind of nickel as the main driver, and not all the metals. And at this point, there was no economic viability assessment because it was considered too early. So these assets were really very, very early. But as you can see, what you find is that depending on how you look at different assets, they rank differently. So when you focus on one portfolio objective compared to another, you find that in this case, the best project changed. And we found that even though project A was ranked 1, the other projects changed their ranking in this regard. And the other thing to note was that even though the most money had been spent on project B to date, it was no further progressed than project A. So if your geology is very complex, you might end up spending a lot more money on something compared to a relatively simple asset. This is a really useful tool to help assess the timelines of different things as well. For example, your ESG permitting, if you think that there's a particularly complex aspect or some risk you might overcome, you can look at that in terms of how you then prioritize your development plan and where things might be ranked. So in my last slide, I just wanted to introduce another tool that we use, which is called the Project Definition Rating Index. This is an index that's been developed specifically for mining projects, and it looks to assess and rank 180 elements of the project across these 4 broad areas. It's a really, really useful tool in understanding risks and aligning different project stakeholders. And it also allows you to rank your project maturity using a kind of standard assessment criteria. It's not a tool like JORC or Kazakh. It's actually more a kind of construction-led assessment that looks at every single risk and ranks it, and the lower the number, the more immature the project and the higher the risk, and the higher the number, the closer you are to execution and construction, and the lower the risk. And we typically use these, again, on projects at all stages. It might seem premature to use this, but one of the ways we also have used it successfully is to track progress through exploration and project development. This example shows an early stage, portfolio of assets, and it's allowed us to plot the relative maturity of these different assets and communicate that to the potential acquirer of the company. So in conclusion, there are many elements and tools for evaluating and comparing early stage projects, and this is critical for investors, acquirers and stakeholders, and to use these as part of early stage transactions. It's not just geologists who should be involved in the assessments, but crucially those who know what it takes to build and operate these projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's really quite insightful presentation. It can be used for educational purposes as well in many banks and companies. Let me invite our next guest, Michael Zlobin. He's presenting on behalf of EBRD, which, as you know, quite active in Kazakhstan and in the region. His presentation is about investing in juniors, DFI's perspective. Please, Michael.
Thank you, Kasi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was not supposed to speak today, but I decided maybe I will put together a couple of slides to summarize some ideas. So the first I wanted to start with is, how strikingly similar the conclusions and the views of the audience are throughout this 1.5 days. So I think we all started with geopolitics, the panel I had the honor to chair, and I think we agreed that there is a momentum for Kazakhstan, right? But there are some challenges, and I really like this quote from the person I'm sure you all know, who summarized it on LinkedIn. So there is a lot of opportunities here, and we are talking juniors now, right? But there are some roadblocks, and I think we need to distinguish, and I will try to bring our experience of looking at many projects in Kazakhstan, Central Asia, and other countries, maybe to distill it to what are the practical implications and steps, both for financing community, but also for juniors. I think after the conference, when you get the slides, you will see the backup about the junior miners program we launched, let's say 18 months ago. I would not, spend time on kind of repeating the criteria, but in a way, we looked at maybe several dozens of projects here in Kazakhstan, but also in the wider region, and we did not manage to find any so far to be able to invest. And we invested in several jump-like projects before. We have a portfolio of 5 or 6. We exited some of them, and today I will present some ideas. So I will not stop or kind of spend time on that, but I mean there are a lot of positives, including the geological potential here in Kazakhstan. And then we as a financial institution need to assess the project, and here I really like what Anna just presented. So this is pretty much the framework we use internally, and we are blessed to have good technical people in-house. And this is what is missing in 99% of cases we look. So if we go to what Vladislav presented, this is like, mid-scale or large approach like to valuation where you have a mine or at least a PFS stage project. So I think we can all align on that and we can bargain this 10-20% difference and to create a financial structure to overcome the valuation difference. But how would you value a junior miner per resource? If there is no resource, everything becomes even more art than science, and this is absolutely, I would say, even impossible to put a number that you can defend vis-a-vis your investment committee. And therefore, it's in line with some of the observations from other panelists that only certain type of investors from certain countries, they can take a view, maybe sometimes strategic view, okay, we want this exposure in this country, we just go and buy it no matter what. And that's why we saw a lot of high stake, high value deals, or even someone acquiring a lot of licenses just to be part of their portfolio. What is important, I guess, is this slide about the challenges, and I will give our perspective. So the funding gap, I really enjoyed the panel about AFC yesterday afternoon. So I think the conclusion was there is infrastructure and financial actors at every stage of the project, but the juniors. So again, we as a BRD, we are trying to address those gaps, but still, what we see is geologists, really, ambitious, smart, local, foreign, they're coming to us with a portfolio of assets. We feel there is something there. This is what they tell us. But data limitations is really significant. So sometimes you have old GKZ resources, and this is already a quite advanced project, I would say, because if you have C1, C2, you can at least have a view whether there is something there before you drill for JORC or Kazakh Sea. But in many cases you wouldn't even have that. You would have a couple of grab samples, and this just highlights the structural issue, I would say, for the junior sector here, because we were told yesterday that there have been 4,000 licenses granted since the reform of their subsoil use code in 2018. This is a lot. How many of those progressed really to from where they've got it to a resource or to feasibility studies? Probably just maybe not even a dozen, right? And here, the issue, at least in my view, is because in the fact that these juniors, they cannot raise the seed capital, because the companies and the data limitation is also could be highlighted here. They don't have something that they can attract international capital, like people in Toronto, in Australia. So investors in Australia and Toronto, they just don't understand the data being presented. And the local market just doesn't exist. So I really welcome the AIFC initiative to create this infrastructure. I think if it's done, it would mean a lot for the sector. But before it's done, what I would probably say is important is that when you apply for a license as a junior or team of geologists, you have at least 5-10 million somehow secured to bring the project to the level it could be presented to the existing financial infrastructure. So to me, this is important. And it's also important for the country. If as a country you grant those licenses, you really want people to progress on those, because, this is the credibility of the country, and in the end of the day, this is the tax revenues. So I hope, from both ends, from the financial infrastructure, but also from the, license regime, it will meet somewhere in the middle. So what we normally look at is, the asset quality development strategy and management team, exactly as Anna mentioned, so I would not probably, develop those. But when we look at the management team, it's important that the people have really expertise on the ground. So it's good to have someone sitting in Perth or Toronto or Vancouver, but there should be the team, at the site developing the project, and there should be seamless communication. We also mentioned, ESG, which is absolutely important, but I would stress on the governance board and shareholders. For us as a development institution, we always look at, how the company, the project is governed, who are on the board, does the company have enough gravity and, this balance of opinion at the high level to it cannot guarantee the success, but it can, reduce your risk that, the money is well spent, the money is raised in a timely manner. So we really pay attention to governance. And yeah, strategic and financial partners are also important, right? And there is nothing wrong to bring someone as a farm in case you don't have resources to develop the project yourself. But if you sit on the license for 5-10 years and you have not progressed one way or another, it raises the question about, whether you had the right attitude to, what you're doing. And maybe the key takeaway I want to, bring is you don't know how the project is going to be developed at the end because the journey is very long. So we encourage the people we meet who develop the project to be prepared for international funding. It means CRISCA-compliant resources, it means international teams, it means the proper way to develop projects, the highest standards of ESG and governance. And if you have that, it's okay to say, okay, we found, the Asian investors, they probably would not appreciate everything, but at least, you would have other options. And, more and more competition on the global arena intensifies, more and more these factors matter for international capital. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. We have just 10 minutes, and let me go to our questions. By the way, if anybody from the audience has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and address it. Let me ask the question, probably, Chair, if you don't mind. With all that said, with all that presented by Michael, Anna, and Vladislav, what are the recent trends that you see, given this spectacular hunt for resources globally, and maybe there is some specific rules of the game in Kazakhstan that you find challenging?
Okay, thanks, Cassie. Yeah, that's quite a broad question. Good question, broad question. I think first of all, just to say that the 3 presentations we've seen, they've covered a lot of ground. On a lot of disciplines, from a technical perspective from Anna to the more financial, legal stuff from Vladislav and Michael. So that's a pretty good introduction and coverage. And even within those presentations, there are subject matters there that are 1-day, 1-week workshops in themselves. So they've covered a lot of ground. The trends, I'd say, at the moment, again, have probably gone perhaps to a more general trend. There's been a focus, obviously, dare I say, for critical minerals over the last few years. I think that has kind of flattened, and people are realizing that perhaps there's more stability in going back to the set of more traditional minerals and metals, and obviously copper is probably top there, and we know about copper in Kazakhstan, so I'm not going to say anything there. In terms of Kazakhstan and the market and the readiness for it, working slightly backwards, and it's come up in a couple of the presentations, but it is that global term and the international term, and it's the market. So if you work backwards, Kazakhstan has to kind of understand and learn that it's not about the CIS and Kazakhstan, it's about that global marketplace, and the competition is huge. So you're putting your projects up against projects in regions of the world that have a very modern approach, a very historic approach, and a very developed mining infrastructure. So it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. I think the way that Kazakhstan can improve its place and make it a sort of an easier destination, if you like, is to get operational ready. So again, picking up a little bit on some of the presentations, it's getting the technical work done properly, not missing out on things, picking up the important factors that might come back and bite them at the end, the metallurgy of projects. Deposits are generally getting harder to find, they're getting deeper, they're getting lower grade, they're getting more complex. So areas like AI and geometallurgy need to start being taken up a little more readily and being developed, and so that the projects and the companies can present their assets in a market-ready format. Reducing risk. It's all about that factor, that reducing risk. And again, some of that was touched upon in some of the presentations. Not all projects have the same risk. They might look the same. They might look very similar. But actually, when the assessments are done, they suddenly change. They suddenly move around. And what you thought perhaps was a more challenging project becomes the best project and the most attractive project to actually consider. I could go on. I won't. Again, quite a bit of ground covered. But yeah, more than happy to take any questions.
Let me probably ask Anna and Vladislav and Michael just quickly comment on that, the recent trends in the industry, if you'd like to, please.
So I think that my feeling in the industry is that we're moving through the end of we're kind of peaking in the M&A cycle now, in the mining calendar, in the mining cycle, and we expect to see an uptick, and we're starting to see an uptick in exploration spend. And we've had a number of years where it's been incredibly difficult for juniors to raise finance and get access to capital. And I think we're seeing a corner turning now. But as with all price booms, it's the wise spenders that win. So, we don't want people just drilling out assets that have been drilled 6 times already. We really want to make exploration success. The ones that will, rapidly get their projects going in this next phase will be the ones that spend wisely and drop quickly, is my thoughts. But I think we're entering now into a phase where we are seeing more exploration capital available, and hopefully that means that it will be a little easier in the junior sector and globally, and hopefully in Kazakhstan that will also happen.
Yeah, great. Vladislav?
Yeah, thank you. Just to share my personal thoughts about MINEX this year. I haven't been to Astana for 2 years, and when I was landing in the airport, I was already excited by the level of dynamics that this city has nowadays. And this forum really bring me to those thoughts that Kazakhstan has a momentum one in the gates, because several things matched here in Kazakhstan. First one is geopolitics, which of course affects our region, and I think if I could say that geopolitics affects Kazakhstan in a positive way, because some investors that were looking in a big country here in the region started to look at Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and so on. And I think it's a good time for Central Asian countries to attract foreign investments from European countries, from the Western countries. And secondly, I think this is my message to those Western investors, that Kazakhstan has a massive junior mining base a massive junior mining assets to invest. Because from my personal experience working here in Kazakhstan, I came to a funny conclusion that every self-respective Kazakh wealthy family has some licenses in their family portfolio. And I think if you just deep in that portfolio, if you talk to people, if you meet with people, I think there are plenty of assets that could be the next like global level assets here in Kazakhstan. And I think this in the next few years we will see some of them.
Well, thank you for your comment, Michael.
Yeah, I really liked, Anna's point that, who spends wisely get the next, piece of pie. I really, relate to that. And also speaking to some of these rich families with licenses here and there, it's really the trend, but I mean, these people tend to develop them, themselves. So they are not available at least for us, or they could be really lucrative but small. So they, in many cases, they kind of wouldn't warrant a proper, financing structure. But speaking more broadly about the trends, I would probably mention a couple of things. So first of all, with all this craze about gold and copper, juniors, they got a lot of attention, and this lifeline capital. A lot of exploration money went there. So other minerals and metals, I think they struggle. Not everyone is prepared to be counter-cyclical. For us, it's probably the matter of mandate. We can be and we want to be counter-cyclical. We like base metals, but we really want to pull this projects. Please, come to see us if you have something which is less sexy. The second point I wanted to make is, I think Kazakhstan competes with Africa really, and maybe the second-tier jurisdictions for international capital. I don't believe Kazakhstan competes with Australia or Canada. It competes with Africa, and and what is nice with Africa, it was like an infrastructure at some point. Now it's really keeping up, but the geology and unexplored potential of some African places, I think it's comparable, if not greater, than Kazakhstan. And therefore, in order to compete with those places for international money, the projects, these juniors and, just developers present, they need to be technically robust and they need to show good grades, good economics and low risk. So this is the message I wanted to leave.
Sure, I mean, it's a great point in the sense that we're not alone in this world. It really depends on Kazakh family that owns the license that Vladislav mentioned. So for some of them, we are the only nation with licenses, but it's not that true. We are running out of time, but I just would like to ask if there is any questions from the audience. Sir?
Ербол Закарьянов, АГМП, Ассоциация горнодобывающих и горно-металлургических предприятий. Но я совсем не согласен, конечно, что каждая казахская семья имеет лицензию. Это далеко не так. Но спекулятивное отношение, конечно, к лицензии очень много. 3000 лицензий было выдано, с первым пришел, первый получил. Но мое мнение чисто, это, конечно, не должно было быть так. Вот. Но, с другой стороны, я хотел бы все-таки те компании, юниоры, хотелось бы им помочь по финансам. Конечно, крупные компании получают очень большие, финансовые возможности, да. Вот я хотел бы задать Михаилу, да, вот вчера был вопрос мне в IT-реку о том, что почему вы геологоразведку не финансируете? Он сказал, что это не приоритет. Нет, это ошибка. Наш президент говорит об этом, все говорят об этом. Надо эту геологоразведку юниорам давать кредиты более такие легкие, да, долгосрочные. Как вы считаете, вот в чем ошибка тогда инвесторов? Не могут они защитить свой проект? Или есть какие-то высокие требования? Вот в чем тогда?
One, two, three. Is it okay? Yeah? Okay, so I will start from maybe saying that for us as a development bank, geology and exploration is a priority, and primary mining is a priority. It has always been since our establishment in 1991. We've been financing mining sector, starting from extraction and midstream and downstream as well. So I cannot comment why for Byterek and development institution of Kazakhstan is not a priority. I believe at least the integrated projects where you have mining and at least midstream could be part of eligibility for them, but this is not something I can influence. For us, I don't think our requirements are strong enough. I think they are okay requirements, and I have a couple of examples where we finance projects, in the second-tier jurisdictions. It was a nice gold project in Mongolia. We invested in 2019. It was PFS stage. The project, was led by really great team out of Canada, but they spent a lot of time in Mongolia. They had local partners. They produced their first gold last year. We earned a lot of money exiting this project. So that was a success story. But they've done everything as international investors would expect. There are dozens of other Mongolian companies. They have not got to this level and they are not getting finance, right? Another jurisdiction, I think you all know Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's a European country. They had a fantastic project called Adriatic Metals. It was done by Australian CEO, and it was IPO'd. We invested again around the PFS time. We exited at the acquisition by a larger miner. So these two projects, they stand out because they have been prepared and conducted throughout at their, I would not say the highest, but I mean the reasonable international standards. They all had, their ups and downs, and the chart showed by Anna ago. It's like, it's normal for industry, but you can invest and you can present your case. Here in Kazakhstan, I think, you also shared that 3,000 licenses, they need to move on. So people who, apply for those licenses, they need to have a plan. Once they get what they've got, how do they progress to the next stage? Because the traction is the most important thing in equity business, right? And unless there is traction and there is some result, it's really difficult to attract other than the angel investors. So the family money, maybe some development money from the local development institutions, they could solve the issue. But how would you decide which one of these 3,000 projects you would support if you even had the money? So something needs to be presented to be able to calibrate and prioritize the project, as a colleague said.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question from Ainur. She's representing AFC.
Hello, Kasi. Nice to see you, dear panel. Hello, everyone. My name is Ainur Kaparova. I'm no longer with AFC. I have left AFC, yes. But I'm the founder of the Mining Project Management Office, and I wrote that framework that for every stage of the mining cycle, there's a suitable financial instrument. So thanks for your compliment. I'll take it personally. My question is, I kind of want to second the question that was done before. So when I was looking at the financing for the mining sector of Kazakhstan, as a financier, I definitely see that the biggest gap is for projects that are not at the PFS stage. However, all of the financing programs that are available right now through Byterek, other government institutions, and even EBRD's JUMP program, I spent a lot of time with Nurjan, they all require to have at least a defined probable resource. And Kazakhstan's problem is to get to that stage. At IFC, for example, there's the stock exchange, the Astana International Exchange, and about 5 years ago, a junior mining listing program was launched there. However, nobody has listed since then. The only listing was by a Chinese company, but they gathered 99% of the book in Hong Kong. So that was just, I don't know, a political thing probably. But there wasn't a genuine junior mining listing. So when I started the mining office 2 years ago, my first question was why. So I looked at the listing requirements, and the listing requirements say that a junior can only list at the AIX only if they have a proven, a measured resource or a proven reserve. And at that point, obviously, who would even need that capital, you know? So yes, I know we're not comparable to Toronto and Australia, but those places, I mean, they probably, their stock exchanges reach that level because they allow to list even at pre-resource. You know, so despite those requirements, I have found 2 junior mining companies locally that have sufficed according to the requirements. They were ready, willing, and able to list. And then we had a very funny exercise of, I went and met all the local underwriters here in Kazakhstan, and all of them were afraid to build a book for these 2 juniors because they don't understand the investment thesis. They think that it's a green field. So multiple problems. At the same time, you know, I know, like my family, I know a lot of other individuals, funds who have appetite, but somehow the underwriters are afraid to go to them and explain. So many things, maybe one of them is educating the public about this investment thesis, educating them what the potential returns can be. And your presentations that you gave today, they were incredibly valuable. Another, my humble opinion, is that institutions such as EBRD, such as Byterek, maybe private funds, and Kasi, you run Alphamar, right? So perhaps these funds could look at, you know, prior to PFS stage, earlier, but I mean, everybody's afraid to take risk, yet there's this tremendous opportunity. So that's the biggest gap, and I hope that, you know, together as an industry, we can fill that gap.
That's really, you know, yep, please.
And sorry, I didn't ask the question. Oh. I apologize. My question was, you know, why don't private funds, why don't programs like EBRD's Jump Fund, why don't you look at earlier stage assets? And what needs to happen for you to get there? Do you need co-funding from, you know, Byterek maybe, or what needs to happen?
Michael, would you like to start?
Yeah, happy to start. So first of all, we don't need PFS to be able to invest. You know, as a co-founder of Jump internally, we set the minimum requirement is the maiden resource. And we've made one investment in a junior in Kazakhstan after maiden resource before PFS. And, you know, EBRD and, you know, I'd like to point out, yes, you know, the Kazakh investor, we are the, you know, 2 largest shareholder in the company, and the company is now progressing towards DFS. So, because I didn't speak about the company because it's still a portfolio, but I mean, this is a great example where we invested as early as possible. But I mean, this is one of the largest and highest grade deposit in the world. Obviously, it has its own risks, but, you know, if you have the prospect of that caliber and that perspectivity, I think it's not an issue to find investors. If you have 0.3% copper, you know, somewhere without infrastructure, this becomes a challenge. So I would say there are even institutions who would invest earlier, but this is not our job because, I mean, we are significant, like, you know, large, sometimes bureaucratic institution, so we have processes. We are just not equipped to invest $200,000, you know, dollars to progress a couple of drill holes. This is not for us. This is for you, and I believe there could be other means of connecting private investors and juniors other than the stock market. Stock market is a good one. Yeah, but I mean, Saratoga Graphite raises money in Australia, and, you know, there are others who raise money in London or Toronto. So to me, this is still the quality of the projects and the teams who develop these projects rather than financiers being like grumpy or not looking very well.
Thank you so much, Michael. Frankly speaking, I would add some notes, but I'm moderating today, so let me pass this privilege to Chair, and Anna, maybe you would just share your opinion whether we are doing all right over here. Over here means Kazakhstan.
Short answer, yes. I've been coming here for just over 20 years. So from that very first visit I made to Kazakhstan, you know, I've seen a tremendous change and tremendous advance. I mean, it's what your point there about the Kazakh Stock Exchange. That's a shame to understand the requirements, because that's quite heavy requirements for a small company starting off. And I think it was touched upon that there are other stock exchanges in the world that will and do cater for earlier stage project finance. I'm not suggesting they'll take anything. You have to present it appropriately, and it does cost money. It's not, you know, it's not a free service sort of thing. So it is difficult, but it is possible if they get the right people and talk to the right people and do the right work, and that will all be advised. So that's something. But yeah, in terms of, I just wanted to throw that in quickly, but because we've done it ourselves. We've assisted companies. There are companies here today that took that route, and where you see them now compared to where you see their beginning is incredible. You know, they've made huge growth, but from very humble beginnings. So it is possible. So. So yeah, I mean, as I said, the short answer was yes, it's positive. But I think there's still, I think it's still underperforming. It's still well below what it's capable
comparing
of.
where it could be.
Yeah, well below where it's capable of. But hopefully we will see further acceleration in the next 5-10 years.
Very diplomatic answer, thank you. Anna?
So my feeling is that the opportunity here in Kazakhstan is on visibility of assets. You know, that a lot of people outside of Kazakhstan do not understand the scale of what is going on here. And also, the way that you reduce risk in exploration is to expand your portfolio. So larger companies that have multiple assets, that have counter-cyclical investments, that are not just a one asset, you know, just gold, have a much better chance of attracting capital and widening, you know, their risk profile. And it might be that when funds are, if there's the appetite to create junior funds here, that's something they have to look at as well. You know, it might be great right now to have a gold fund, you know, with gold juniors, but actually, in terms of the health of the market and a balanced risk, you need to look at all different commodities, and that might also help in terms of managing the balance of funding so that we don't end up being entirely dependent on copper and gold here and not developing anything else.
Makes sense. And I would like to say that it feels like we need an extra hour for, you know, proper discussion. But we have Arthur here, and that's the only person in the room I cannot really go against. So let me thank our tremendous, amazing panel, our speakers today. And thank you so much for your time and your attention. Thank you.